Hello, everybody. Professor T, the People's Professor, part 3 of the Liturgy of Lament, the Worship of Loss. Father, thank you for your wonderful word. Amen. So, the exchange of a child and a parent is designed through the Passover to make this compelling encounter between what is remembered and what is performed. And that is, in essence, what the worship of loss is. To remember what transpired in the past. So it shapes and informs how you perceive, internalize, and your perspectives in the present. So this process of what Israel did was to make this impelling and compelling encounter between what is remembered and what do you do with those memories? How do they activate and actuate action? Now, transposing this, we're talking about Solomon. Solomon's mournful autobiography in the book of Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon in his old age. He had fully proved that all the pleasure on earth uh, is not able to give nothing but empty and unsatisfying life. He shows how impossible it is for the vanities of the world to meet the longing of the soul. His conclusion is that it is wisdom to enjoy gratitude, good gifts of God, etc. Because all of this that God has given us at some point will be brought into the judgment. He gives a history of his search for happiness. He engaged in intellectual pursuits. He gratified his love for pleasure. He carried out his schemes of commercial enterprise. He was surrounded by a fascinating splendor of a court life. All that the carnal heart of opulence, materialism could desire, it was at his command, yet he sums up his experience in this sad record in Ecclesiastes 1:14. He talks about how vacuous, how empty, the mist, the vapor, that life is just ethereal, it's ephemeral, it's existential without God. Nothing is real. Dear reader, as you stand in imagination on the slopes of Moriah, you look across the Kidron Valley upon the ruined pagan shrines, take the lesson of the repentant king home to your heart. Be wise. May God your trust. Turn your face resolutely against temptation, vice, and costly indulgence. Its effects are fearful upon the constitution of those whom it does not speedily destroy. Solomon had a dizzy head, loss of strength, loss of memory. He did not understand or remember the worship of loss, the liturgy of lament. And the derangements of the brain and heart quickly follow upon such transgressions, you see, and his morality was affected as well. His shattered nerves and wasted frame showed the results of violating nature's laws. He confessed that he had wasted life in unsuccessful chase after happiness. His own mournful, this word mournful is an adjective, feeling, expression, or inducing sadness, regret, grief, sorrowful, doleful, melancholy, woeful as well, all is vanity and vexation of spirit to him. Solomon, his learning without God, he said, is foolishness. Solomon had great learning, but his wisdom was foolishness. for he did not know how to stand in his moral independence, free from sin, and the strength of character molded after the divine similitude. Solomon has told us the result of his research and his painstaking effort to preserve an inquiry. He pronounced all his wisdom, the great plethora of wisdom he had accumulated and synthesized, all was reading. But all the things did not bring him happiness. He sat upon his magnificent throne, his frowning countenance, dark in despair, dissipation had left its impress upon his once now fair and intellectual face. He was sadly changed from youthful Solomon. His brow was furrowed with the care and unhappiness, and he bore in every feature now the unmistakable marks of sensual indulgence. His lips were prepared to break forth and to reproach at the slightest deviation from his wishes by his servants. Solomon's conclusion was, growing out of indulgence, of a perverted appetite, yet seemed powerless to work the required reformation. He was aware that his physical strength, calm nerves, and sound morals can only be secured through temperance, self-government. He knew that gluttony leads to drunkenness, that intemperance in any degree disqualifies a man for any office of trust. You wonder about our collective politicians today, why they're making the choices and voting the way they are in Washington, D.C. Gluttonous feasts, food taken to the stomach at an untimely session that leaves an influence upon every fiber of the system, and the mind also is seriously affected by what we eat and what we drink. Now, how does learning memory work? How did Solomon fail the test of the worship of loss, the liturgy of lament? So learning is modification in behavior due to the increased knowledge of skills. Memory, the ability to recall information and experiences. Now, learning requires memory. The liturgy of lament, the worship of loss, requires memory. Learning requires the storage and retrieval of information. Memory requires or relies upon learning. An individual's established knowledge base provides a structure of past learning and incoming data to that structure through this association. Now, the three stages of memory: short-term, sensory, short-term, and your long-term memory. Sensory memory is the visual, auditory, olfactory information transfers to your short-term memory. Short-term memory stores 7 single or chunk items for 30 seconds without repetition, solves problems through reasoning, process, example, organizing facts in a coherent essay when you're writing an essay. The ability to transfer information, long-term memory, from the short-term to long-term memory is relevant to the learning process. People use the attention, repetition, and association with past learning to encoding information. Neurologically, encoding happens when information is repeatedly processed in the hippocampus. So this relationship, this critical factor in coding now, of incoming data to pre-existing mental frameworks. The more association made with the established learning, the better new information is retained. Memories are not stored in a single location. They are complex neural networks spread throughout the brain's entire surface. So encoding does not ensure retention. 80% of learning is forgotten within 48 hours. There's a need to activate storage and retrieval process. Retrieval information temporarily copies it to the working memory for further processing to the hippocampus, and the REM sleep memories are replayed and reinforced in the hippocampus today. So what is the Hebrew word for memory or to remember, zachar? It also, in the denominative form, it means to mark so as to recognize. That's that engraving, codifying, encoding process. To remember by implication, to mention, to make mention of, to be mindful of, to recount, to record, or to make, to be remembered, to bring, to call, to keep, to put in remembrance, to think on, to think on it well. Solomon forgot that process of the worship of loss. The Lament Psalms, he forgot them. So Israel had been chosen by God, chosen to be holy people in the world, but Israel could readily observe that other ways in the world worked well for them. They forgot what God taught them. And often better than their own when they looked around at all the AI technology, all the computer knowledge, ingenuity, cognitive acuity, the neural links they want to inculcate in us. They noticed the way of technological religion that they call the Canaanite. We call it AI, artificial intelligence religion. We call it Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Instagram or any of these other platforms or TikTok. And the ways of power politics, they wanted, they said, to be like the other nations. Israel forgot. Solomon forgot. The encoding, the long-term executive memory, and the prefrontal cortex was not working. This concludes part 3. Father, bless your word. Thank you for helping us understand this element of it. Amen.